created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
Hello, everybody. I am so excited for today's program because today, at least for this series, this is the first time that we are going to talk about one of my very favorite composers. Of course, in this episode of Parlons, we will be talking about Rossini's Cenerentola. Alors, Parlons de la Cenerentola. For English speakers, it is called Cinderella. So for Spanish speakers, La Cenicienta, Cenerentola, or Cinderella, it's the same girl. I think, if not everybody, most of people nowadays, or most of people now and the previous good design of years know who Cinderella was. It's a very famous story. So why would a character, because Rossini is a character. Why would a character like Maestro Rossini would go for writing an opera on a subject such as Cinderella? Of course, by the time Rossini composed this in the early 1810s, the world was pretty different. It's already 210 years, almost 210 years from the composition of La Cenerentola. The world has certainly changed, but this is one of the stories that has remained for over 200 years already. I have to say also that Cenerentola is not the most famous composition by Maestro Rossini. You must be very aware that the most famous composition is, of course, Il Barbero di Sevilla. So this Barbiere is the one that people knows most about Rossini. Of course, the Overtura of Guillermo Tell, that is another very famous composition. But Cenerentola, unfortunately, is not that famous. I have to, at this point, I would like to first confess that personally, I like Cenerentola more than Il Barbiere, maybe because the writing is very different to what happens in Il Barbiere. I am not saying that I don't like the Barbiere, but by far I love a lot more La Cenerentola. I would like also to share with you that there was a good number of years, and a good number of years ago also, that I used to celebrate on the day of my birthday to watch Cenerentola. So it is that important to me that I said, okay, it will be my anniversary. What will you be doing? Maybe a good number of things, but among them, I will be watching or listening to complete recording of La Cenerentola. It is also the case that, as we have shared in the past with some other composers, it is true that you can hardly find a singer who builds a career only on a role of two, and that this would be Rossini's roles. Most of these are either sopranos or tenores leggeros, even though we're going to talk more about the role of the mezzos in the writing of Rossini. But of course, you at this point may be telling me, what about Juan Diego Flores, or what about the Ramon Arturo Vargas, who was also a very famous and important Rossinian singer? And that is true. But it is a very limited number of singers who have built a career on singing these operas, on singing these roles. It is more likely that someone will build a career, a woman singing Verdian roles, or maybe Wagnerian roles, if that is the type of her voice, or being for the bel cantista roles and things like that. But this narrow it only to Rossini. There are not that many, and there is a good explanation for that. Of course, they are appealing, they are attractive roles that everybody would go and clap and applause and celebrate the singer's performance. Of course, that's going to happen. But the Rossinian roles, in particularly for the tenors, are demanding for the type of voice that they require. And maybe I will exceed a little myself in explaining this, but stopping a little more on the voice of the tenors, They are usually if you're aware of the words that belong to the world of opera, the tenores can also be classified, that tessitura can be classified into tenore leggero, lirico, and spinto, and the leggeros are the best suited tenors to sing Rossini because there are way too many ornaments in the writing of Rossini. There is also not much need of a powerful center or I would say middle or low voice because Rossinian roles for the tenor are usually in the upper register with lots of ornaments, as I was saying, and high notes as well. Rossini likes to go for above the A, goes for B, goes for a high C, and if I remember well, there is a case where he even writes a D or a D or a D flat at least for the voice of a tenor, which goes into a very high register. So a voice that can do all these fioriture, ornaments, going very high in the height of the notes. That's pretty much what a voice of a tenor leggero would be doing. Of course, as Katia and I explained in a previous series, the voices that are very well suited for ornaments or high notes are usually what we can call in the world of opera small voices, small voice in terms of volume, in terms of power. So orchestration could easily cover a voice like this if they were to sing some roles such as in the verismo. The orchestra would never allow the singers to be heard. And of course, the singers would spoil their voice trying to sing these verismo roles or heavier roles. So the orchestration goes with the right voice. Don't expect anything to be as powerful and intense as we have heard in previous programs. But on the other hand, these light voices, as it is the case of the tenor, same applies to the soprano. And then let's make a pause to talk about the mezzos. It is very famous or it is very well known that Rossini liked to write for mezzos and even for contralto voices. And there is a romantic explanation for that. If you go and read the biography of Rossini, you will find out why is it that he liked that voice much. Also remember that the soprano voices were not the most important voices those days. Remember that Rossini was alive or was a composer in the 1800s. That means that there were still castratos, and when the castrati were there, the sopranos and no one else got any attention because they were the rock stars then. So Rossini really didn't care much about the sopranos. What has happened recently is that many sopranos have had the scores being adapted so that they can sing it, and they have added even more coloraturas or fiorituri than are written. They add notes and they add a lot of things, which also there are anecdotes that even though Rossini wrote in that style of ornaments, he even disliked when singers added more than what he had written. Going back to the mezzos were the natural voice for whom Rossini wrote his most important roles. Rosina in Il Barbiere di Siviglia is a mezzo. In this case, Angelina, who is our star, La Cenerentola herself, Angelina is a mezzo as well. If you go for l'Italiana in Algeri, it's also a mezzo. That's the natural voices that Rossini composed for. Not the sopranos, but as I just mentioned, there have been some adaptations in the music so that they can perform this. And people used to the light soprano voices have sometimes problems in understanding why is it that a mezzo is singing. An anecdote that for me it's very funny, but that if you're a singer and even a leggero tenor, maybe you won't like it. But something funny that I like to say is that sometimes the mezzo has even a much darker voice than the tenor when talking about Rossinian roles. That is very funny from my perspective, right? But well, everyone has the voice that he has. So I think that is enough for the introduction in general terms for La Cenerentola. Now going into detail, a little more detail on La Cenerentola, we are going to let me share with you that I think, or from my perspective, the role that I enjoy more is Don Magnifico. At this point, maybe I should share with you that Rossini is known, if you read his biography, that he really didn't believe in magic. All that magical stories and gods and supernatural entities were not of the taste of Maestro Rossini, who that I said before was a character himself. So, with that in mind, Rossini takes La Cenerentola story, Cinderella, and turns it into a more something that is still with parts that are not believable, because Rossini never cared about writing anything believable. Well, of course, we can talk about his opera seria, which of course are more into that way, but in terms of this opera, that is a opera buffa or opera comica, Rossini really doesn't care much about that. So I will not be explaining the whole libretto, because the words of the arias and all that are not written to make sense. They are written to have fun. And that is the case for Don Magnifico, that in Rossini's, he is replacing the stepmother that makes Cinderella's life miserable. In this case, it is Don Magnifico who will make the life of Cenerentola, of Angelina, very miserable. And he has an opening aria that starts with, if you're familiar with the style of those years and the style of Rossini, he usually has some parlato or quasi parlato introductions before he actually starts singing. So it starts with miei ramponi femminili. Vi ripoglia, mi vergogno. On magnifico mio sogno, mi veniste a sconcertar, mi veniste a sconcertar, vi ripoglio, mi vergogno, come son mortificate, degne figlie di un barone. Via silenzio ed attenzione, state il sogno a meditar. So this introduction aria, or this introduction piece by Don Magnifico, he shows on scene, on the stage, because his daughters, of course, exception of Angelina, that is his stepdaughter, are going to explain him, to make him learn that the prince will be soon choosing a wife. So in that sense, the story of Cinderella is kept, a prince looking for a wife, so everybody will be invited to a party. And Don Magnifico appears on stage, somehow telling her daughters to behave correctly, if we could say that. And nextly, he's going to start the narration of the dream he just had. Of course, his dream, as many of our own dreams, just doesn't make any sense at all, because he dreams of a donkey who ends up flying, covered with, I just happen to have forgotten the word for pluma in English, feathers. So he dreams of a donkey who ends up flying, going into the sky, all covered, as if he had wings. So that that makes no sense. But Don Magnifico needs to be, not only is he a bass voice, but also this role takes an excellent actor and a very funny singer, so that even, and no matter what happens ahead, people are always find this character attractive. Mi sogna il fosco e chiaro, mi sogna il fosco e chiaro, un bellissimo somaro, un somaro ma solene, quando un tratto, o che portento, sulle spalle a cento, sulle spalle a cento, gli spuntavano le penne, e in aria s'envolò. Ed in cima un campanile come in trono si fermò, ed in cima un campanile come in trono si fermò. Si sentiano per di sotto le campane ad indonar, din don, din don, din don, din don. Col cici di voto mi veniste a risvegliar, col cici di voto mi veniste a risvegliar, col cici di voto mi faceste risvegliar, col cici, mi faceste risvegliar, col cici, mi faceste risvegliar, ma d'un sogno s'intralciato e quel simbolo spiegato, ma d'un sogno s'intralciato e quel simbolo spiegato. La campana suona festa, allegrezza in casa è questa, quelle pere siete voi, quel gran buono plemerio resta l'assino di poi, ma quell'assino son io. Chi mi guarda vede chiaro che il somaro è il genitor, il somaro è il genitor, il somaro è il genitor. Fertilissima regina, l'uno e l'altro diverrà, e di l'uno la notina di poi abbraccerà. Un re piccolo di qua, servo, un re bambolo di là, servo, e la gloria mia sarà, sì, la gloria mia sarà. Fertilissima regina, l'uno e l'altro diverrà, e di nono la rosina di la moglie abbraccerà. Un re piccolo qua, servo, un re bambolo di là, servo, e la gloria mia sarà, sì, la gloria mia sarà. Un re piccolo qua, un re bambolo là, un re piccolo qua, un re bambolo là, e la gloria mia sarà. Un re piccolo qua, un re bambolo là, un re piccolo qua, un re bambolo là, e la gloria mia sarà. Fertilissima regina, non l'altro diverrà, e di non la rosina di la ti abbraccerà, e la gloria mia sarà, e la gloria mia sarà, mia sarà, mia sarà, mia sarà, mia sarà. Of course, when you have the opportunity of watching this scene on a stage or a recording on YouTube or whatever you means you have at your access, you may identify that there are some versions where the bass, Don Magnifico, dances on a stage with his daughters, which is a very attractive scene because it is very funny. I mean, to see people having fun on stage is something that always catches our attention. In the past, we have shared way too many dramas, so thinking of an old man talking to his daughters, telling the dream of where a donkey ends up flying into the sky and that he is the sky, the donkey himself. I mean, it's just to be enjoyed. Nextly, as the daughters have, because they are going to get ready, as they will go to the party to the prince, because they really believe they will be chosen to be the next princesses, Cenerentola is left alone, so enters Don Ramiro. Don Ramiro happens to be the prince, but he has decided, along with his counselor, a philosopher, that he will be disguised as he is a servant of the prince. He will not show his face as the prince, because that way, in the advice of his counselor, the philosopher, says that's the only way you're going to learn about the true nature of the women who want to be your wife. So he arrives to the house, to the old palace where Cenerentola lives with his family. Il barone, Don Magnifico, is a barone, but he's poor already. So he arrives, and there is a short scene, and I have to explain that in this writing of La Cenerentola, we will find many of the things that Rossini likes to do. Put ornaments here, then slow down for a second, then go fast again, 100,000 words immediately for the singer to prove his fiato, and then he will stop. And when there is a love scene, it will be kept very short, just the same as in Il Barbiere when Il Conte sings Se il mio nome saperlo bramate. In this case, Don Ramiro will not be singing an aria now, not an aria of love, but there will be some pieces here and there between him and Angelina, because he's about to meet Angelina, La Cenerentola herself. So the singing is more passionato, at least more passionato in the way Rossini could do it. It's not Puccini, so it has to be Rossini's way of expressing. Non so e non so che in quelli occhi scintillò un so and Cenerentola will reply in her turn, io vorrei saper perché il mio cor mi palpito. Io vorrei saper perché, and then more. And this is just Rossini's pure style. Ta 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 da da da. Then ta 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 da da. Playing with the scales, descending scales, descending scales, trines, trills, and all of that. So even though it is not a pure duet of love as we know them later in later styles, we understand that Don Ramiro and Cenerentola fall in love, as Don Ramiro says, le direi ma non ardisco. I would tell her, but I don't dare. Cenerentola replies, parlar voglio e tacio intanto. I would like to speak, but I am in silence. Parlar voglio e tacio intanto. I would like to mention at this point that Rossini, in his style, he repeats the same phrases over and over again with variations. I was telling you, maybe faster, more scales, thrills, adding things here and there, so that even though they are repetitions, people, the audience, can still be captivated by the variations of those ornaments. They unite themselves, both Don Ramiro and Cenerentola, when they say quanto è caro quel sorriso, scende all'alma e fa sperar. Una grazia, un certo incanto, brilli in suo quel viso, tan 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 tarara, tarara, tarara. And this keeps going like that. And after all those ornaments, as I was telling you, then go again to slow in la pausa. E fa sperar, e fa sperar, e fa sperar. And that way ends this sort of duet of love, where Cenerentola has fallen in love for Don Ramiro, and Don Ramiro has fallen in love for the simplicity and the sincerity of the words of Angelina, La Cenerentola. And he goes on with the business, but because remember he's disguised, so he says, Del barone del figlio chiedo. I am looking for the daughters of the barone. Dove sono? Qui non le vedo. And Cenerentola says, stan di là nelle altre stanze, stan di là nelle altre stanze, or verranno, addio speranze. So they are in the other rooms, I will call them. Ah, they are coming, and she says to herself, oh, goodbye to my hopes, because of course she's expecting to meet the prince herself and be a participant. Ma di grazia, says Don Ramiro, voi chi siete? Io chi sono? Non lo so. Non sapete? Quasi no. Non sapete? Quasi no. So when asking Don Ramiro, so who are you? She says, non lo so, non sapete. You don't know? No, replies Angelina, I don't know who I am. So Cenerentola continues, quel che padre non è padre, onde poi le due sorelle, e la vedova mia madre, ma fu madre ancora di quelle, questo padre pieno d'orgoglio, quel che padre non è padre, onde poi le due sorelle, e la vedova di mia madre, questo padre pieno d'orgoglio, sta a vedere che mi imbroglio. So more of the typical Rossini's style, telling words faster, not really sung, and then slowing to, and then moving ornaments again. Scusate, perdona, la mia semplicità. Da 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 da. And then goes for a second part of the duet where they are playing with these sounds, as Don Ramiro insists that he can't believe she doesn't know who she is and why is she so confused. And Cenerentola continues, so goes ahead with the story that please forgive me for being such a simple woman. And Don Ramiro says, mi seduce, mi innamora quella sua semplicità. Mi seduce, mi innamora, ma quella sua semplicità. And as they are talking about this, we hear the voices of the stepsisters of Cenerentola. They are called Clorinda and Tisbe, that are absolutely fundamental to the melodies of Rossini. There comes a very lovely scene that starts with the callings of Clorinda and Tisbe saying, Cenerentola, Cenerentola. And Cenerentola replies, vengo, vengo, vengo. Che innocenza. Ci lascio proprio il cuore, questo cor più mio non è. Che innocenza, che candore, che innocenza, che innocenza. This scene is very well remembered by people who have seen Cenerentola, because she's running from one side to the other, giving her sisters the things they need so they can go to the party of the prince very well very well dressed, very well in the maquillage and all of that. So by the end of this short scene, Angelina and Ramiro say goodbye to each other with a phrase, ci lascio proprio il cuore, ci lascio proprio il cuore, ci lascio proprio il cuore, questo corpo mio non è. Questo corpo mio non è, questo corpo mio non è, più mio non è, più mio non è. And then the orchestra, the typical Rossini orchestra with that full brightness. With that, we have the two main characters of the story, the Prince Don Ramiro and Angelina La Cenerentola, having met in the house of the Barone. And now it's the time for if Don Ramiro is pretending to be the prince, then there is someone else pretending to be... Don Ramiro is the prince pretending to be a servant, and then there is a person pretending to be the prince, and that man is Dandini, who arrives in scene with all his... with all the gentlemen coming with him and the horses, the richness of the loyalty. And it has a very lovely aria that starts also very slow. Come una pene giorni d'aprile va volando leggera e scherzosa, he says, corre al giglio, poi salta alla rossa, dolce un fiore a cercare per sé. Ah, like a butterfly in a days of April that is flying, light, scherzosa, that runs to this flower, then jumps to a rose, dolce un fiore a cercare per sé. Pretends to be lovely, but of course, what Rossini is pretending to do is that he looks ridiculous. Of course, funny and ridiculous. And that scene after that is the first part where he pretends to be lovely, interrupted by Clotilde Antisbe. Ma quanti favori, ma quante filuvio, che diluvio, che abisso d'onore, nulla, nulla, vezzosa, graziosa. Starts flirting with the girls, pretending to be the prince, playing his role. And this very funny scene is also interrupted by Don Ramiro, who has returned. Remember that Don Ramiro is the true prince, but he's pretending to be the prince, the servant. And they have some dialogues between Dandini and Il Principe. Ma al finir della nostra commedia, che tragedia qui nascer dovrà. Ma al finir della nostra commedia, che tragedia qui nascer dovrà. Ma al finir della nostra commedia, che tragedia qui nascer dovrà. Ma al finir della nostra commedia, che tragedia qui nascer dovrà. Ma al finir della nostra commedia, che tragedia qui nascer dovrà. Che tragedia qui nascer dovrà. If you notice, or Rossini, he repeats the same phrase around 6 times, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He repeats the same phrase 5 times, repeating exactly the same, but faster, so that this wrapping up of Dandini's aria is also very lovely, because there is now the voice of Prince, the intervention of the Prince, the intervention of Clorinda, the tisbe, and the chorus. So that's how he wraps up his aria, this very lovely aria, saying, at the end of this, if I could say, this scene that we are pretending, you are pretending to be the prince, I am pretending to be a servant. When this all finishes, quelle tragedia qui nascer dovrà. When they find out that we are playing with them, they are not gonna like it for sure. This ends up, there comes another very beautiful scene where now we will have Don Ramiro, Don Magnifico, Cenerentola herself, and we will also have the philosopher who will arrive there to try to put some order, because Don Magnifico is denying to have a terza filia. He says, I only have 2 daughters. I do not have a third daughter. Of course, he's referring to Angelina. Remember that he refuses Angelina to be part of one of her daughters. And that's why the philosopher now there says, but here in the books of the court, it says that you have 3. The name of the philosopher is Alidoro, by the way. He says, qui nel mio codice and with that explaining that he has a record of the 3, Don Magnifico says, okay, yeah, I have 3, but guess what? One of them died. And when he says one of them died, Angelina, of course, understands that Don Magnifico prefers to say that she's dead rather than recognizing and acknowledging her as her daughter. And somehow in a pitiful scene where she's where she's begging, "Oh, lasciatemi, please let me go to the party. I would like to dance with all of you. Please, please." Of course, we're not talking about those tremendous dramas as in Pagliacci. Remember that always the mood, even when it is in this opera comic or opera buffa by Rossini, even though when there is a sort of a tragedy, it is still very light, very funny, because Rossini's style in these operas is not to make us suffer, is to make us feel happy, released. So in the tragedy that Angelina will not be able to go to the party because Don Magnifico will not let her, that's how these lovely, very lovely scenes finishes. Alidoro, the philosopher, the counselor of the prince, remains with Cenerentola. And if you have already guessed, I was telling you at the beginning that Rossini really didn't like magic characters in the stories. He really didn't care about that. So the second important change that he made to the story of Cinderella is this one. Instead of having a magic fairy helping Cenerentola, she's having the philosopher, the counselor of the prince. So the counselor of the prince will, of course, not make magic, but will provide with a transportation, with a carriage to Angelina, and will provide her with very beautiful clothes. She will be dressed as a member of the aristocracy. That's the magic that Alidoro will perform for Angelina. That's how Rossini resolves the fact that he doesn't believe in a magic fairy to support her. There will not be mice turned into people to help the carriage to help her arrive to the palace. These will be still the servants of the prince that Alidoro will put at the service of Angelina la Cenerentola. And she will have a triumphal arrival to the palace, but before we get there, at this point in time, Don Magnifico is very sure that one of his two daughters will be chosen as the wife of the prince, recovering, power and money. That is what matters to him. And so I would like also to say to you that now that we are going to talk about the second aria by Don Magnifico is to La Cenerentola pretty much, if you allow me to make the comparison, what Figaro is for Il Barbiere di Siviglia. The importance of Figaro in Il Barbiere is, of course, cannot be challenged. And same thing here for the lovely role of Don Magnifico, who now in this aria will be with the male choir, the choir of the people, the gentlemen who are with the prince, because he's already dreaming big. And as he's dreaming big, he's giving them already instructions as on what is going to be spread throughout the city to make people know the importance of Don Magnifico. So he says, Intendente, Regitor, Presidente, Continuar, grazie, che piacer, che girando là nel cor, grazie, che piacer, che girando là nel cor, si venga a scrivere quel che dettiamo, 6.000 copia, poi ne vogliamo. And the choir replies, già pronto a scrivere, tutti siamo qui, già pronto a scrivere, tutti siamo qui. And Don Magnifico, in this part where he's telling what is going to be spread out throughout the city to make everybody aware of the importance of Don Magnifico, noi Don Magnifico, questo in maggiuscole, bestie maggiuscole, because it is pretended to be a dialogue between Don Magnifico and the gentlemen of the court. Bravi così, noi Don Magnifico, tu che barone dell'antichissimo Monte Fiescone, grande intendente, gran presidente, con gli altri titoli, conventi eccetera, in splenitudine d'autorità, riserva l'ordine, chi leggerà? Di più non mescere per anni 15 nel vino amabile, d'acqua una gocciola agli escapietur, strangulatur, perché eccetera, l'onde eccetera, della eccetera, barone eccetera, perché eccetera, l'onde eccetera, cennello eccetera, barone eccetera, e fatto già, varone eccetera, e fatto già. That's how the male choir replies with the varone eccetera, e fatto già. Ora figgetelo per la città, ora figgetelo per la città. The chorus still replies in pranzo in ordine, andiamo a mettere vino a diluvio, si beverà, premio bellissimo di piastre 16 a chi più malaga si beverà, premio bellissimo di piastre 16 a chi più malaga si beverà, premio bellissimo di piastri 16 a chi più malaga si beverà. And with that phrase of premio bellissimo di piastri 16, where Don Magnifico is repeating his phrase and the choir is repeating his melody in return, is how, with all those repetitions, I was telling you that Rossini likes to repeat the same words, is how Don Magnifico wraps up his second aria. Of course, Rossini loved the role of Don Magnifico. Instead of giving us a woman to detest in the stepmother, he's giving us a funny stepfather. And now it's time to talk about the entrance of Angelina. But before we get to that, there is another duet. At this moment, you already have noticed that La Cenerentola is full of many lovely episodes. And now it's going to be the turn of Ramiro and Dandini, the prince and the servant themselves, disguised in the opposite roles. And it is usually called Zitto zitto, piano piano, senza strepito e rumore. Zitto zitto, piano piano, senza strepito e rumore, delle due quale l'umore e satezza e verità. Piano 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 piano, piano 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 piano, senza strepito e rumore, delle due quale l'umore e satezza e verità. Zitto zitto, piano piano, delle due quelle l'umore e sattezza e verità, e sattezza e verità, e sattezza e verità, e sattezza e verità. And this is the melody that Don Ramiro will keep throughout this duet that will be full of repetitions also, and Dandini will keep his melody as sottovoce a mezzotuono in estrema confidenza, sottovoce a mezzotuono in estrema confidenza, sono misto di insolenza, di capriccio e vanità, sottovoce in estrema confidenza sono misto di insolenza, di capriccio e vanità. Sottovoce sono misto di insolenza, di capriccio e vanità, di capriccio e vanità, di capriccio e vanità, di capriccio e vanità. Allora mi diceva una fine del barone, al maestro un gran testone, o che uguale non si dà. Allora mi diceva che una fine del barone, al maestro un gran testone, o che uguale non si dà. Zitto. This melody that is going to be repeated is basically asking Don Ramiro, so of those two daughters of the Barone, what are they like? And Dandini says, well, they are sono un misto di insolenza, di capriccio e vanità. So all I can say of those two girls is that they are capricious, and vanity is what describes her. And Ramiro says, but the Alidoro told me that there was one of them that was worth it. She says, these two of them, no. There is a little ahead, because this, I'm going to mention it to you because this will turn them against them. There in this duet that turns out to be a quartet, because now both Tisbe and Clorinda will appear chasing the prince. Principino, dove siete? principino, dove state? Ah, perché m'abbandonate? Mi farete disperar. Io vi voglio, viva l'io, io mi voglio, viva l'io. As they are chasing the prince because they want to learn who is he going to marry. And he says, well, I will marry one of the sisters. E l'altra, says, e l'altra, all'amico la darò. So he says, I am going to, the second one, the woman, the sister that I don't marry, I am going to share it with my servant, with my friend, the servant. And both of them say, no, un scudiero, no signore, un scudiero, questo no. Of course, they are aspiring to have a prince as a husband, not another servant. So they repudiate the sole possibility of marrying Don Ramiro, only if they knew that they are showing their repudiation to the true prince. But this is how this lovely duet goes. And right after that comes the entrance of Cenerentola, Angelina herself, now dressed, as I was telling you before, as a woman with beautiful dressing, as a beautiful woman who deserves to be part of the royalty. People in the palace are, wow, who is this woman arriving now? Don Magnifico and the two sisters are saying, well, that woman is not that attractive. For some reason, she looks like our Angelina, but our Angelina is cleaning the house, so of course it is not her. Right after that, there is another scene, the wrapping up of the act, which is also very lovely. The mix of all the voices there, Tisbe, Clorinda, Don Magnifico, Dandino, Ramiro, Il Coir, only to celebrate that they are about to have their meals, is also very funny as well, as they are, eager to start eating for free. And that in a very lovely crescendo, that's how we are going to, or Rossini is going to end his first act. Everything is on the table. Don Magnifico and the two sisters thinking that they are going to, at some point, one of them will be marrying the prince. The prince disguised, who has already learned about the true nature of the sisters, and Angelina, of course. Dandini disguised and playing his role, and Alindoro moving everything in favor of Angelina. And repeating myself, with a very lovely concertante. It's how, and the concertantes of Rossini, so full of happiness, repetitions, melodies, one singer going for a melody, the other singing a different one, and all of them mixed in perfect harmony. That's how it ends up, this first act. And so the first act that has just finished with his lovely concertante, tarararan, tarararan, tan taran, tarararan, tan tararan, tan tararan, tan taran, tarararan. We are now in the second act, and we have a third aria for Don Magnifico. As I was telling you, Rossini really loved this role of Don Magnifico, the role instead of the evil stepmother, the role of the father who is making Angelina's life miserable, and this third aria where he dreams that he's going to be part of the new royalty again. With an aria that says, sia qualunque delle figlie, no matter which of the two daughters. Non lasci, in abbandono. Non lasci, in abbandono. Non lasci, in abbandono. Un magnifico papà. Non lasci, in abbandono. Un magnifico papà. Of course, there is a very beautiful, happy orchestration by Rossini in the parts that Don Magnifico doesn't sing. Già mi pare che questo è quello, confidendomi al cantone, e cavandosi il capello, incominci, signor barone, alla fiassia reale porterebbe un memoriale. Prenda per la cioccolata una doppia ben coniata, e una doppia ben coniata, facci intanto scivolar, e una doppia, facci intanto scivolar. Io rispondo, sì, vedremo, già è di peso, parleremo, da palazzo può passar, sì, da palazzo può passar. Da palazzo può passar, sì, da palazzo può passar. You're going to notice again that, and I think this clarification is important because remember that this is meant to be sung by a bass, of course, a much nicer voice of a bass, which is not mine. But in return, when you have a deep bass voice, it is difficult to sing that fast. So sometimes the basses, depending on the type of bass they are, they ask it to be a little slower so that they can actually pronounce the many words that are going to come. I think that I am going to slow down a little that part so that, and maybe the other part make it faster so that you can notice the difficulty of the articulation that many of Rossini's arias end up being tongue twisters. Mi rivolto verso seta, tutto il diretto tinguenti, mi si chiede una cuffietta, fa sospiri e complimenti, Valencina, si ricorda coi affare, in già mi intende senza argento, parla e sorri la manina alquanto stende, fa una piastra srocciolar, una piastra srocciolar. Io galante, occhietti bei, per voi che non farei. Io vi voglio contentar. Io vi voglio contentar. Vi risveglio in mezzogiorno, suona per il campanello, che mi vedo là intorno. Supplichevole però questa cerca protezione, quella torto vel ragione, qui vorrei non piegoccio che una cattedra ed un ciuccio, che una cattedra ed un ciuccio, un ciuccio, chi la palle delle spine, chi la pesca delle anguille, e di tanto in ogni lato sarà sempre contornato di memoria e petizione di galline di turbione, di valichi, di brucate, di calle di marinate, di ciambie di pasticcette, di catini, di confetti, di pastroni di dobloni, di bagnine di caffè, di ogni lato, di ogni lato sono sempre contornato, di ogni lato sono sempre contornato, di ciambie di pasticcetti, di cattecci, di confetti, di pastroni di dobloni, di bagnette di caffè. Basta, non parlate, terminate, ve ne andate, non portate, basta in carità, serra l'oscio un catenaccio, importoni, seccatori, fuori, via di qua, fuori, via di qua, serra l'oscio un catenaccio, importoni, seccatori, fuori, via di qua, fuori, via di qua, presto, via di qua, presto, via di qua, via di qua. And of course there is again a very bright orchestration by Maestro Rossini to wrap up this lovely aria. And another thing that I wanted to make a comment out of the participation of the in the Rossinian composition, the role that is expected of the singers is that they are basically in some parts singing these tongue twisters. But remember that this is meant to be funny, so there is more than one bass in the character of Don Magnifico that is actually singing. So imagine you're singing while you're singing. So imagine a bass dancing while he's doing that is really something that I know that you would really, really love to see. But now it's time for things to change, and with a very famous aria by the tenor, everything will be discovered. And Don Ramiro decides to finish up this charade and says to Dandini, Principe più non sei di tante sciocche, si vuota il mio palazzo. Oh, miei figli, sia pronto il nostro cocchio, e fra momenti così potessi aver la dai venti. And with this, he opens up his scene, starting with, he has Arietta and a cavatina, si ritrovarla io giuro. And that scene happens because he has encountered Cenerentola, and if you remember the original story, Cinderella, she happens to lose a glass. She's wearing these, the shoes are in glass. And in this, it is not a glass, it is going to be, I think I don't recall the word in English, but that in Italian is the pegno adorato, making reference to this, that women, usually women, in fact, either women or men can wear it on the hands, because she had this manilio. So this manilio is the one that she gives to the prince and says, if you really want to marry me, when you will find me when you have the other, because of course Cenerentola is wearing the two, so gives one to the prince and says, when you find me wearing the other, you will find me, and you will find me in my true nature. If you still want to be with me, well, then that will do. And that's how the prince decides to be the prince again. At this point, when she has given this to Ramiro, Cenerentola doesn't know that she has in fact given it to the actual prince. So this scene is very famous, not only because it has lots of ornaments in Si ritrovarla io giuro, io la ritroverò, sì, io la ritroverò, la ritroverò. Not only that is the opening scene, and then a very small romantic part, the pegno adorato e caro, che mio lo singhi almeno. After that part goes the brightest part that the light tenors, the tenore leggero, like to sing complete, because of course it is to display the beautiful, very beautiful and high notes that the leggero tenors can sing. Noi voleremo, domanderemo, ricercheremo, ritroveremo, noi voleremo, domanderemo, noi voleremo, domanderemo, ricercheremo, sì, dolce speranza, freddo timore, dentro al mio cuore stanno pugnal. In this scene, the tenor goes for a good number of high Cs. You know, people like that high C in the voice of a tenor. So your favorite light or tenore leggero sings it, if I recall well, it is around 6 times in that scene that he hits. I have counted so far, 2, 4. He sings for this number of times that high C, so that's why people like this scene. And right after that, he leaves the palace to find where La Cenerentola. He doesn't call him. He doesn't know she's Angelina. So he lives with his people, with the gentlemen that are the servants in his court, to go and find Angelina. And this, before he finds Angelina, there is another duet, and that is, from my perspective, one of my 2 favorite duets between bass voices, or a baritone and a bass. I love, of course, I am thinking of one of them is Don Pascuales, and the second one is this one, not in a preferred order, just the order I mentioned. It's going to be Dandini and Don Magnifico in a very funny scene and difficult scene because the two of them will sing very fast. It says, un segreto di importanza, un arcano interessante, io vi devo palesar. So Dandini will unveil the secret to Don Magnifico, who in return will get very upset and demand an explanation and an excuse from the prince. E una cosa stravagante vi farà strasecolar, un segreto d'importanza e una cosa stravagante vi farà strasecolar, vi farà strasecolar, vi farà strasecolar. Don Magnifico will reply in return, senza batter le ciglia, senza trarre fiato, io mi pongo ad ascoltar. And this requires two very good actors, Don Magnifico and Dandini himself, as in this is going to be again a confrontation, but it is not going to be the confrontation as in La Forza del Destino, where swords and deaths and maledizione and all of that. It's going to be a very funny confrontation where the two voices are going to sing each of them their own lines right after when he has discovered that Dandini is not a prince but a servant. Si says, di questa ingiuria, di questo affronto, il vero principe mi racconto. And Dandini replies, non si incomodi, non farà niente, me parta subito, immantinente. And Magnifico says, non partirò. Dandini, lei partirà, non partirò, lei partirà, ci rivedremo, ci parleremo, ci rivedremo, ci parleremo, non partirò, lei partirà, ci rivedremo, ci parleremo, pronto il bastone, lei partirà, pronto il bastone, lei partirà, non partirò, tengo nel cervello un contrabbasso, povero diavolo, en un caso che con il tuo vaso più lo fa, vostra eccellenza. In this part of the duet, each of them is singing his line very fast. Dandini saying, vostra eccellenza, abri prudenza, se vuol raso sapone e petine, saprà richar las barbificar, guardatelo, la loquela. Povero diablo, vostra eccellenza, abbia prudenza, sobrechar las barbificarla, guardatelo, la colela. And Don Magnifico is replying, eccolo, tutti diranno, mi burleranno per la città, mi burleranno per la città, mi burleranno per la città. So now the whole secret has been unveiled. For reasons of destiny, Don Magnifico has arrived in the middle of a storm to the palace of Don Magnifico, where they are very upset because a woman that looks like Cenerentola has spoiled everything with the arrival of Don Magnifico, of Lindoro, Dandini, and the Prince Ramiro, to be clearer. They arrived to the palace, and so Il Baroni and the Figlie have just discovered that the one that they treated so bad was the actual prince. So they said, and now starts a sextet, 6 voices joined, called Questo nodo avviluppato, questo gruppo rintrecciato. Each of them repeating very similar phrases, of course, in the style and the tone that belongs to each of the voices. That also the questo nudo avviluppato, questo gruppo ritrecciato. That exaggeration, gruppo ritrecciato, is also an artifice that singers and sometimes the director likes to call singers to do because it exaggerates something that is already, if you allow me the expression, ridiculous on a stage. Of course, it is ridiculous that they never recognized Cenerentola, of course. That was to be recognized. So the question lo va sviluppato, question gruppo ritrecciato, ta ta ra ta 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 ta, followed by the melody of another singer. Question lo va sviluppato, question gruppo ritrecciato, chi sviluppa più raggruppa, chi rigruppa più sviluppa, ta ta ra ta, and the voices joining together. If you're going to be watching, and I hope that I am convincing you if you have never seen La Cenerentola, if you ever happen to watch the Cenerentola, please enjoy, because that questo nudo avviluppato is another thing that I love very much. But now there is not much to be solved. The prince has found Angelina, La Cenerentola. The two sisters, of course, in a very political way, they say, please, Angelina, forgive us. We never knew that such a great woman was among us. So forgive us. And Don Magnifico also, Don Ramiro, of course, is very upset. But now things are brighter for Angelina, because she has been chosen to be the wife of the prince. With that happiness, they'll leave for the palace, and we will see how still, even being now the chosen and in the palace for the prince, the father, Don Magnifico, still wants to mistreat her, and he's Don Ramiro, as he wants to, treat as he deserves Don Magnifico. Angelina stops him and says, no, at the end they are my family. Don Ramiro says, you have such a great heart, you are such a wonderful woman. And with that, with a very elegant scene on stage, we have the final part of the opera. And if you have noticed so far, Angelina, the main character, has not had an aria herself. Don Ramiro has already, Dandini has already, Don Magnifico has already had 3 arias for himself, but Angelina hasn't been given the chance of singing her aria. So she will have the complete scene for her to sing is around 10 minutes, if I remember well. I have to also mention that since Rossini has many repetitions, either singers or directors cut sometimes the scene or parts of the aria or the cabaletta because it is very long, and she will start singing non più mesta canto al fuoco, non più mesta canto al fuoco, sarò sola gorgheggiar no, a un lampo, un sogno, un gioco, il mio lungo palpitar. That's how she's going to sing her happiness, and that is how this opera is going to end up, telling us that the beautiful hearts, those people who are pure in their souls, will always reach happiness. Non più mesta canto al fuoco, starò sola gorgheggiar no, a un lampo, un sogno, un gioco, il mio lungo palpitar. Non più mesta accanto al fuoco, non più mesta accanto al fuoco, sarò sola gorgheggiar no, a un lampo, un solo gioco, il mio lungo palpitar. Again, if you notice, we have that slow or much slower opening of the aria, which will speed up very soon. But because what Rossini wants to do is to give all the importance to the role of Angelina, they very much loved mezzos for Rossini, and as she speeds up, things will go faster. Accanto al fuoco staro sola gorgheggiarlo, a fu un lampo, un sogno, un gioco, il mio lampo palpitar, a un lampo, sogno, un gioco, a un lampo, un sogno, un gioco, il mio lampo palpitar, a un lampo, sogno, un gioco, a un lampo, un sogno, un gioco, il mio palpitar, a un lampo, sogno, un gioco, a un lampo, un sogno, un gioco, il mio palpitar, il mio lungo palpitar, il mio lungo palpitar, si palpitar, si palpitar, si palpitar. And with a very beautiful, bright, tremendously brilliant melody, I would like to insist that's how Rossini makes his version of a woman pure of heart who at the end deserves to be happy. Thank you very much for joining me on this program where I had the chance of sharing with you my thoughts on my preferred opera by Maestro Rossini, La Cenerentola.